Yes, sound works. Right. Okay. Right. Thanks for coming back, because there is nowhere else to go in the building apart from here. So that's good. So in between coffee and the pleasures of lunch, then we have the culmination session here, where we've got 3 speakers followed by a panel session. Speakers are each supposed to do about 10 minutes per presentation, and then the panel session is about half an hour. And the panel session will be joined by Yasmin Kemper to provide some expertise on transport as well. So we'll be able to tackle a wide range of topics. So I'm Stuart Haszeldine from the University of Edinburgh, and I have the dubious honour of chairing it. So we'll just try and get on with it. So first up speaker is Ben Burggraaf, who is obviously not a native Brit, but has adopted Wales as his home. And that's fine. Very enthusiastic guy. I've heard him talk in other meetings. History in the water industry, history in energy, and Ben is now going to talk about South Wales cluster. And so take it away, please. Off you go.
Thank you very much, Stuart, and also thank you very much for your permission, apart from also the UK government's permission for me to stay here as well. Yeah. It's really good, and that's fine. Okay, good. I'm Ben Burggraaf. I'm the Chief Executive for Net Zero Industry Wales, which is a new body that's here to support industry in Wales. I don't know how we can. Oh, here we go. This is a clicker. Here we go. So we're a new entity. We're only formed in October when I joined Net Zero Industry Wales. Actually incorporated in December. Bank account last week, so it's a really evolving kind of process. And what we're here to do is we are a not-for-profit umbrella organization that's here to support Wales industrial clusters. The clusters are multiple, because initially we're talking about the South Wales industrial cluster, but we also want to support HyNet and particularly the D-side area, Anglesey and other parts of Wales as well going forward. So, and we really want to support the actual deployment execution of the plans they're developing, rather than just being a lobbying organization. We're a membership organization, industry-led board, and we're core funded by Welsh government, and we're having some really good support from the energy and climate change side, as well as the economy side. Our overall purpose is to make Wales the country of choice for sustainable goods and services, and really align ourselves on what we're doing with the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act and all of their objectives there. What we really want to do that by supporting coordinating of regional infrastructure development. Richard was already mentioning in his presentation earlier this morning about how important hydrogen, CO2, port, but also electrical infrastructure is, and want to aggregate that and making a really clear demand to Westminster, where most of those powers are for that particular need. Enabling them also Welsh industrial clusters and the partners to share knowledge and facilitate the collaboration, which has already taken place very heavily in the South Wales industrial cluster, very successfully, and then a little bit lower in the clean growth hubs. And we want to continue that as an organization, because there's some really good ecosystem that's created there. And then thirdly, develop and own the net zero pathways for industries in Wales, particularly in discussions with government, giving them a clear sight of what industry is doing in order to meet the carbon budgets, which are legally bound by law in Wales, but also in the UK overall. And then thirdly, we want to really enter and lead agreements with third parties for the advancement of those clusters, in particular, the deployment and execution of the plans. Yeah, so we want to really help and go into that co-creation space. So single voice, we want to build and continue the partnership which is already there, but build and further expand those partnerships, support policy development, and really access also some additional funding. And that could be private or public. Now, a little bit about the South Wales Industrial Cluster Plan. There will be more available if you go online, www.swic.cymru, have a look, and you'll have the whole cluster plan. But what is it really revolves around? It revolves around the 5 cogs, energy and resource efficiency, fuel switching, the clean growth hub. This is the local collaboration between industries and having those symbiotic kind of relationships to share energy, but also resources. What each other's waste is can be somebody else's treasure. So that's the kind of like collaboration at the local area. Again, there was a great example of that in Richard's presentation earlier about how all those energy flows can benefit across the haven. Carbon capture and utilization. So key part of our plan is not only to look at carbon capture storage, but also use the carbon and recycle that to make sustainable aviation fuel. So the project that LanzaTech is currently planning in Port Talbot with our Dragon project to make sustainable aviation fuels using waste CO2, but also use then the hydrogen from Milford to create sustainable aviation fuels is one of those key elements of our plan. And last but not least, carbon capture and storage. Now, when you look at the decarbonization pathway on the right-hand side, there is a real kind of like drop in 2025 to 2030, but then even further to 2035 area. And the key component in there, particularly in the early stages, is really around CCS and CCU. So that technology is very important to actually get us towards carbon budget 3 for Wales as quickly as possible to that 63% radical reduction target, which we're currently aiming for in Wales. Now, we want to talk about radical barriers and challenges. So one of the key things, I think, what we're trying to do within the Net Zero Industry Wales, and me particularly, because I'm the only person at the moment driving it, is we want to really focus on 3 key areas. One of them is culture, policy and regulatory framework, and infrastructure. And those are the 3 key success factors for any clusters to succeed. I didn't invent that. That is actually coming out of the European Observatory for Clusters and Industrial Change, which has done extensive research in this area over time. And in order to have a successful cluster, you have to have all those 3 in place. And what is fantastic in Wales, we made the South Wales Industrial Cluster with all the work that's ongoing with the Celtic Freeport and the announcement recently, that buzz and that culture is really developing in Wales, which is great to see. So one of the key challenges in the culture is we still have a public perception around CCS and CCU, which we need to overcome, about this idea of this being another landfill. Yeah. So I think we have worked very closely with industry together. We've created those collaborations. And what we now need to do is expand that and actually start telling a little bit more of those stories in detail. So storytelling is key, and also explaining which component of CCS and CCU is actually technologically advanced and innovative, and what is already common practice. So CO2 capture has been done for many decades. So is that new or novel? No, it isn't. So I think we need to tell the story a little bit more. And I think really link that also to the circular economy kind of story about how we can use CO2 beyond 2050 to feed ourselves, to clothe ourselves. Yeah. So I think that whole circular kind of thinking around CCU is really important, but also the importance of CCS about how that can potentially be used beyond 2050 and beyond, again, as a way of harvesting CO2 and carbon as a raw material. On the policy side, I think there's really Wales and no clear stance yet on CCUS and blue hydrogen. And I think we really need to make sure that now becomes an integral part with a very widespread support across all ministerial departments to actually get it into carbon budget 3 as one of the key enablers and one of the success factors to actually hit that 63% target. And then last but not least, I think infrastructure. We have no permanent store in South Wales. So what we really need is CO2 shipping and rail. Yeah. And so that is coming to place, particularly when we talk about dispersed sites. I think there's a real opportunity to rail CO2 into a harbor and then further on, on a ship. And so there's a lot of good projects already happening, not only in Milford Haven, but there's also 7 CO2 in Avonmouth, where they're developing actually quite a lot of work already on this rail element. And it is, I think, adding 10% of additional cost, 20% of additional cost, but it is still feasible and still in the variable, in the typical variance we're seeing on the cost basis. So I think it could be cost effective. And then CCU is also a solution to this problem, because if we can actually recycle as much carbon as needed, then we also have to ship less. So I think there's a real need for CCU in that overall plan as well. So we already have existing adequate projects in place on sustainable aviation fuel, creating platform chemicals. So the work that University of South Wales is doing with Tata to actually make acetate from CO2, waste CO2 and hydrogen, which is a demonstration which is already taking place. And but also Vale, the nickel refinery in Glidach, has already an algae farm in process. So there's already some exciting work happening also in this research area, in demo area. So that's me. Hand over to the next speaker.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you very much. You're ahead of time. So well thought out. Thanks, Ken. So next up, we have Abby Samson from the University of Sheffield. Abby's lecturer in fuels and combustion, and today she's taken an interest in dispersed CO2 and the applications of direct air capture and the positives and negatives that can bring. So you have your 10 minutes without hesitation or deviation. Off you go.
Thank you, Stuart. Is there a timer anywhere? I don't go over.
That's time, yeah.
That's fine. Thank you.
There's a slide changer there.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. So I thought I would sort of add to the discussion here and talk a little bit about direct air capture, which I don't think gets mentioned very often. Okay. So there was a really good study that Space commissioned on CCS deployment in dispersed industrial sites about 2 years ago, where they looked at all of the sites that were considered emitting sites in the UK. So you can see that on the map on the left-hand side, and they narrowed down something like 1,300 sites in the UK that were all considered to be emitters. But out of all of those sites, only 199 sites, so basically, are available for CCS. Anything that is smaller than they said 50 kilotons per annum of emissions is not considered economically feasible at this point in time for CCS. And then out of those 200 sites, they further considered which ones were actually suitable for CCS and ended up with 82 sites. So out of all of the emitters, we've got 82 sites that are sort of compatible with CCS at the moment. And then out of those, 35 were considered to be dispersed, right? So how did they consider what was going to be, or what is dispersed? First of all, it had to be, so if it was within a cluster, but there is no nearby storage like South Wales, that was considered dispersed, of course. But if you're sort of more than 30 kilometers on a UK scenario, of course it's different elsewhere, then that's also dispersed. And if you're sort of a different category, if you're within other industries within 20 kilometers, so these are the people in the peaks that are close by to each other, and then there are ones that they considered truly dispersed. So we've sort of heard a lot about some of the risks involved with trying to get CCS to these dispersed sites. We've got technical issues in terms of energy supply. So this is for the compression of the CO2. We've got water access issues for the capture plants, potentially. Other resource related issues like oxygen supply if you're in the cement industry. We've heard a lot about policy. So limited or no comprehensive plans, regulatory frameworks are at different stages everywhere. And the fact that the lack of permitting is deterring investment. And then transport and economic issues. So you've got risks of stranded assets if you have no other alternative uses for these dispersed sites. So if you've got infrastructure, for example, a really long pipeline that's only serving one site, then that's not benefiting from any economies of scale. And the study that Base commissioned did some number crunching, and they found that the cost of transport is ranging somewhere between £15 per ton of CO2 captured to something about 44 tons, obviously with varying carbon reduction potential. And pipeline is best, with shipping sort of coming out at the more expensive end of that scale. So what are some of the alternatives? Obviously, we've got fuel switching is one of the alternatives. So for industry that's got significant process emissions, cement, glass, lime, they found actually that CCS achieves a much higher level of abatement than switching to hydrogen at this point in time. There's a new paper that's under review from colleagues that are present here today that was looking at CO2, the cost of CO2 avoided if you're switching to hydrogen from natural gas. And they found that actually, if you're looking at the lower cost estimates of what direct air capture and storage are predicted to be, and I'll talk a little bit more about costs in a little while, They found that the cost of the avoided carbon is actually cheaper with natural gas and DACs than it is switching to hydrogen. I say that, but of course, this might change with the prices of hydrogen predicted to drop with the UK and the EU's hydrogen roadmaps, as well as the US 111, so 1 kilo in $1 per kilo in the next decade, where they're saying it's going to be $1 to $2 per kilogram of hydrogen, green hydrogen by 2030. We'll see. What are some of the other alternatives? So CCU has been mentioned a lot. There are some obviously technical issues with CCU, so land requirements, the fact that a lot of the technology is still at lower TRLs. You've got high energy demands, but actually some of the main concerns are the limited market size for CCU projects. So we're always talking about kiloton scale as opposed to CCS, which is megaton scale. And the thing with geographically dispersed industry or emitters, CCU will have exactly the same problems as CCS with transport if you're not co-located. So you have to look very carefully at those sites. And if they're truly isolated, then are you capable of co-locating CCU? It might not be so easy. Oops. And so that sort of brings us to the benefits of direct air capture, direct air carbon capture and storage. So basically, we've got really high location flexibility, right? So we can place these sites close to ports, close to storage sites, within clusters, within facilities. And so that avoids all of the limitations in terms of access to water, in terms of access to electricity, maybe. And you're not having to deal with the transport issues. And it can tackle emissions from all of the smaller sources that CCS is deemed not economically feasible for, as well as other sort of emitters where CCS is just not reasonable, not just because of scale. Yeah, so residual process emissions. We've got different types of technologies. I'm sure everybody here knows a lot about this already. We've heard some of the people talking about MOFs today and yesterday. In terms of absorption technologies, we've got the amine based technology that's quite mature. We've got the mission zero people, we've got the carbon engineering types, lots of different swing technologies. But I guess the biggest concern that people have is how much does this cost, and is it going to be too expensive? So the Sixth Carbon budget did a whole bunch of studies on scenarios, different costing scenarios, right? So they have a widespread innovation scenario, and then they've got this balanced pathway, which is a more conservative sort of estimate of everything. And they're obviously, they say the early stages of DACs start off at about 400 pounds per ton of CO2 captured in the mid-20s. And then in the widespread innovation scenario, so they say that DACs is going to be cost effective in the mid-2030s, where they're saying it's going to be deployed when the price reaches 169 pounds per ton of CO2. In the balanced scenario, DACs doesn't become cost effective until 2040, where they say that it's can be deployed when it reaches 210 pounds per ton of CO2, and then they end up by 2050 saying the cost is going to be between 120 and 180 pounds per ton of CO2. Some companies and some technology is saying that it's actually going to be even lower than 120 pounds, with new sort of incentives coming out. Oops. And there are further, sorry, I want to go back here. So there are further considerations that haven't really much been looked at with optimizing DACs and how to bring down the costs further. So this was a study done by colleagues who are here today in Hull. So Dr. Michaelos is in Hull, and then other people that you all know at the University of Sheffield. This was presented in Lyon last year. And basically, this work, which is sponsored by the UKCCSRC is looking at not just co-location of DACs, but also integration of DACs. So they're calling it CODACs. And basically, it's looking at having an air absorber alongside a typical sort of gas absorber. And they're saying that the study shows that you can get specific reboiler duties down to 3.5 gigajoules per ton of CO2, which is sort of half of what you would normally see otherwise. Yeah. Other people are looking, so this is the Oxy people who are saying that because of the new IRA that was announced, they're thinking that they can do 135 DAC plants by 2030, by 2035, and each of them is going to be capable of 500,000 to 1 million tons or capturing of CO2 annually. And they're also looking at other sort of scenarios where they're locating their DAC facility alongside a lot of their other technology. In this case, they're utilizing some of that CO2 for the production of sustainable aviation fuels. So this is what a colleague, Chen-Fei Wu, yesterday called, basically this is carbon recycling. It's not really storage or greenhouse gas reductions, but it's recycling. But yeah, so they're saying that they're predicting that direct air capture can remove something like 15,000 megatons per annum, which is a lot. A similar sort of pilot is happening at the University of Sheffield, at the Translational Energy Research Centre. So this is new work that they're going to be getting up to. This is in collaboration with Mission Zero, where they're building a direct air capture plant that they think is going to deliver 50 tons of CO2 capture per annum, and that's combined with their sustainable aviation fuels production work, where they're looking at power to liquid production through 2 different routes, and their DAC unit is going to be used in conjunction with their other reactors on site to produce eventually SAF. That's me. Great, thank you.
Good, keeping time. Very happy, thank you very much. And now third and last talk in the formal talk in the session is a double act with Lee Mills and Karl Shepherd, but Lee Mills is going to do the presenting on Natural Resources Wales, and this is going to describe how Wales tries to merge what I would call the Environment Agency, the Natural Environment Regulator, and I don't know, the permitting. Over to you to describe how Wales does it.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Nice to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Like I said, here my colleague Karl. The ask from us really was to give you an overview of Natural Resources Wales. So I've just got a few slides to actually set out how we're framed and what we do in Wales as far as regulation is concerned. Okay, so NRW is the largest Welsh government-sponsored body, employing about 1900,000 staff across Wales, with a budget of 180 million. That budget is made up from grant and aid, as you can imagine, from a public-sponsored body, fees and charges for regulation activities, and some commercial activity in our forestry department, etc., and some energy. We were formed in 2013. It's actually April the 1st is our 10-year anniversary. Received the email yesterday reminding me of that. So that's 10 years of actually being structured where we are, and we largely took over the functions of the Countryside Council for Wales, Forestry Commission Wales, and Environment Agency. So for context, in England, you have Natural England doing your kind of SSI work, conservation work, and in Scotland, it's Nature Scotland who do that. And of course, you've got the Forestry Commission Scotland and Forestry Commission England. So Wales now, those 3 areas are under one umbrella, which makes our remit very, very large indeed. So you can see why we've got 1,900 staff to actually deliver that. We normally receive a remit letter from Welsh Government at the start of each financial year, setting out what Welsh Government wants us to achieve. In December, we received a letter which covered 4 years, so it's a much bigger ask from Welsh Government, and set out a much more comprehensive list of things they want us to achieve. That ranges from things like climate change, adaptation, work in forestry, energy, industrial decarbonisation. It's well worth a read if you want to find out more. An easy Google search will find out for you on there. Okay, so our framework kind of sets us out differently to EA and SEPA, etc. I just touched on the umbrella situation we have on Wales with those bodies. The Environment Act Wales states that NRW must pursue sustainable management of natural resources and apply the principles of sustainable management of natural resources. That's that legislation. We have to follow that, we have to deliver that, and we have to use those principles on the side in all our thinking and everything that we do. And you can see that, I'm not sure if you can read them. I'll just go through them quickly. Adaptive management, we have to look at the spatial scale. Collaboration and engagement is key for us. Getting the public involved. Of course, we need evidence to make our decisions. We look at multiple benefits, taking account of the intrinsic value of natural resources. Look at the long-term benefits of our actions and consequences, and indeed look at preventative action. All this encompasses building resilience of our ecosystems. So that's in legislation. That's what our mandate to actually deliver that. Ben briefly touched on the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. Of course, that's unique to Wales as well. I understand more countries around the world are looking at that act now. I think Canada is one, and that sets out, each public body must carry out sustainable development. So that's not just NRW, that's all public bodies. So that's councils, anything to do with the bodies. And we've set up public service boards, which include various NHS, are on there, NRW, fire brigade, police brigade. And a part of that is setting out wellbeing objectives. And you can see those links there. Prosperous Wales, resilient Wales, healthier Wales, a more equal Wales, and a Wales of cohesive communities, and a Wales of vibrant culture, and thriving Welsh language, and a globally responsible Wales. So our main roles and responsibilities, we're advisor to Welsh Government and to industry, landowners, managers, and the wider public and voluntary sector. Touched on the regulation, industry, waste sites, marine, forest, designated sites, for example. So there's that big remit, like I touched on the first couple of slides, about how big the organisation is. We are designated of special sites of scientific interest, SSIs, ANOBs, and national parks. We respond to about 9,000 reported environmental incidents a year. It's a Category 1 emergency responder. A former role of mine was actually responding to water quality incidents. So we respond to many, and that could be industry, waste, anything really that causes damage to the environment. And we're obviously a statutory consultee to almost 7,000 plan applications a year. We manage 7% of Wales's land, including the Welsh Government Woodland Estate, National Nature Reserves and flood defences. Of course, the Forestry Commission then as that in our image too, what was Forestry Commission land. And of course, we're a partner in education and enabler. We have various visitor centres around Wales, which we do education for schools, etc. And we help people learn about the natural environment. And of course, one of the key things for us really, especially Karl and I, is the evidence gathering, monitoring. Everything that we do needs to be evidence-based. And of course, I touched on the employment of 1,900 people. That goes up and down, but that seems to be our permanent basis for staff. Okay, I touched on the permitting licensing authority. Just to hammer home really that we permit waste sites, industry sites, heavy industry, chemicals, steel, power generation, forestry, water quality, water resources, UKCCSRC. So my colleagues here today from that department. I think Mr. Tim yesterday asked about the price of carbon at the moment on the UKCCSRC. I think it's 70 or 80 pounds. My colleagues tell me. And I wanted to just put that slide up because I think when you're looking at permitting for CCS, you want to look at the bigger picture as well and make sure that all the permissions are kind of included. We're hearing reports that, you know, something like a species license might hold up some determination. So just make sure you've got everything in place, and especially in Wales, where we're the actual manager of all those different permits. Okay, CCS and our role. Okay, we're a technical advisor on carbon capture readiness to development consent order process. We permit CCS plants for geological storage under EPR Schedule 1 Part 2 Chapter 6 Section 610. EPR is the Environment Permitting Regulations. Okay, and we share that with England, and you know, that's one of the synergies with EA and us. The CCS is currently no BREF. So the BREF is the best available techniques reference document, which sets out standards. So working collaboratively with industry on that, and the UKCCSRC has been heavily involved in that process on guidance. And we set permit conditions following Article 14.6 of the emissions directive, Industry Emissions Directive. Okay, on the CCS pipelines, we are the statutory consultancy for planning. And then the UK Emissions Trading Scheme includes CCS. That's a development piece of work which our colleagues are involved in. And of course, we're a conservation advisor in Wales. That's key, I think, when you're looking at CCS projects, to bear in mind that although we're under the same umbrella, we do have to consult internally on that, and just have that obviously in your mind when you come through to us. Pre-application advice. We actually handle at the moment lots of different schemes. I'm involved on the Landstech work at the moment. Also some work with RWE. That's kind of centrally being driven by our policy department at the moment. And I guess things to think about. I think top one is really key for us, early engagement. You are thinking of a project in Wales, come through to us, earlier the better. So I think once we enter the statutory process, it's a lot tighter then to actually change anything. So if we speak before that point, it's easy for us, and we have more leeway to actually, and more time basically to actually look at those proposals. And then think about the whole system thinking, not just your activity, you know, the local environment, you know, the people who live there, you know, what else is happening in that system. And sustainable management of natural resources. That's the point there is a good one. Can you think about more when you're developing CCS, improving biodiversity, adaptation to climate change, circular economy? All these things will come up in the permitting process, and if you can evidence that, that is really a good thing to do. And last but not least, there is the need to share learning not just from forums like this, but with other regulators. We share lots of information with the EA, Ireland, and Scotland, and likewise with academic bodies like the UKCCSRC. Just some links there finally. Please get hold of me or Karl if you have any queries. I understand these slides will be circulated, so there's a few links on there as guidance has been presented, but please come through with any queries, and that's me.
That's great. On time again. Glad I don't have to copy down the Welsh links in a hurry, so that's good. So format now is in this session to invite the speakers up to form a panel here on the front, and I'll just then take any questions, any commentary from the audience on what people have just presented, if we tackle that first. So if the speakers want to come up and occupy these chairs, and Yasmin also, please, to come up to add that shipping and transportation part. Any order you want, yeah. And for anybody online, I've also got an online window open here. So if you're online, you can submit questions in the chat, and apparently that will magically appear in front of me on another screen. So you are enfranchised. All right, anyway, so first up, anything that people want to comment on, critique on, support on with the actual presentations which have just been made. About Wales, yeah, about Wales or elsewhere. Yeah, carry on. Yeah, right, microphone.
Hi. So I'm Roberto from Cardiff University. I mean, it's quite interesting things that what you presented now. One of the key things that I just want to kind of put out there is that throughout these talks, there's not just this. We have come to the assumption that there are no storage capacity in Wales. So then, well, I am an earth scientist working actually on trying to find some potential storage in Wales offshore. And are there any initiatives from the government side, from SWIC or something, to try to explore potential storage sites in Wales? Because obviously there's, at the moment, there are a lot of initiatives and a lot of effort going on exploring the North Sea to find more CO2 storage. But I feel like that there's kind of a lack of implementations trying to explore offshore wells to find more CO2. I don't know what are your comments?
So that's like two questions, though. You're asking about storage in Wales, which to me means land, and then you just talked about storage next to Wales, so which is in the Irish Sea, maybe. But anyway, I'll ask Ben if you've given any thought to that type of upgrade.
Yes, is the answer. There are some companies who are trying to develop some stuff. So I actually have a meeting with a company over a couple of weeks. But I think it's important to note that there's already existing projects ongoing. And what is more important at the moment is that we actually have real deliverable projects that actually have an ability to deliver by 2030. So if you've seen Richard's article presentation earlier today, we have to start developing now. There's no time to actually physically do a lot of exploration now in order to do some of that work now. So we're currently in this pragmatic stage, but it doesn't stop us from finding alternatives. So there are, I call, some opportunities. They're still in the very early stages of development, but where true focus is at the moment on actually delivering those big emission reductions through real projects. And that means that we have to use stores that are already currently in development or at the final stages of their development. And that is at the moment in the North Sea, could be in the UK, but could also be cross-border with the EU potentially. And that's what the exciting thing about shipping is. But shipping is currently seen as the most credible route at the moment for decarbonizing South Wales.
I've got a question about DAC. I'm Chris from University of Edinburgh. So yeah, in terms of DAC, and I just wondered if you had a handle on, so you mentioned about some of the benefits it has relative to other CCUS technologies. Obviously, this is a kind of a common problem or challenge with net zero generally, is that you have different technologies competing for, be it pore space, seabed. I know with the East Coast cluster, there's a lot of competition between wind and CCS. In terms of land for DAC, obviously at the scale it's deployed, for example, in Iceland at the moment, it's the kiloton scale, but once you get up towards where the ambition is, up to megaton, it's going to take a lot of land. For example, colleagues have modeled what a megaton DAC plant might look like with current technology up in Scotland, and it would be bigger than the St Fergus gas terminal. So I just wondered how, if you had any sense of how that's going to play out. I guess it builds into the resource point you made as well, how that might play out in terms of competing with those other technologies for land and resources. Bit of a vague question, I know, but interested to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. Thank you. That's actually quite valid. There's always going to be optimization that has to happen with people trying to figure out what's best to do with land and all of the other resources. But I guess the important thing to remember is that with DACs, you've got the opportunity to capture CO2 from any of the emission sources where you have no other choices.
So to me, it seems like a no-brainer, despite of how large it is. And I mean, obviously there will be engineering optimization in the future, but we will always have residual emissions. What are we going to do?
Thanks.
Can I also reply to that? Because at IEAGHE, we have also done a study on ducts. And one of the main selling arguments of ducts, especially in comparison for carbon removals compared to bioenergy with CCS, is actually that it has a lower land footprint. I mean, you could end up doing a DAX process, and then the energy you need for it, which is a lot, would come from bioelectricity. Then you would onshore a large indirect land footprint. But usually if it would come from another renewable source like wind or solar with a low land footprint, then you still have the plant footprint, but you would have that for like every technology option. So
if you do the calculation in, let's say, Wales, about if you wanted to do 20% emissions captured by DAC, is there enough power in Wales, enough water and enough land to actually make that a feasible ask?
yeah, the water footprint is another interesting question, because it depends on the DAX process. There are DAX processes that are water consumers, but you can also design a DAX process to be a water producer, which would be really interesting to use in arid regions, for example, like the Middle East.
Right. But if we thought about Wales,
If we thought about Wales, yeah.
then do you think that, do you have any perception of how big an ask that is for the land area and the natural Wales people to?
I was just going to say
Yeah, have a guess.
no, I don't know how large that would be, but if Wales wanted to abate via DAX, it wouldn't need to be located in Wales necessarily.
No, but that's colonialization by backdoor, isn't it? So if we
Well, currently, I think it's only effective to do DAX where you really have a renewable, low-cost electricity option. And if you don't have that, you should probably think about other options first. And of course, you should always think, because DAX currently still is the thermodynamically, as chemical engineers, it's like the worst option you can do, because it's the highest cost, the highest energy demand that you need, right? So you should.
Last resort option.
Yeah, it's the last resort that you should do.
Yeah. Okay. Go to the audience. Then a question over there. Any questions online as well? I'll just remind people online.
Yeah, I agree. DAX probably is a last resort option, but I've not seen any figures that say we can meet net zero without a significant amount of DAX. So where it's going to be placed is almost academic, because we're going to have to do it anyway. So we may as well just get on and do it, right?
Anybody else got a theory about where DAX should be developed? Yeah.
Has DAX been looked
at? You say
at?
who you are as well.
Yeah, Sakib Sultan, Energy Security Net Zero Department in the UK. Has DAX been looked at offshore at all, and co-locating with offshore wind, for instance?
I'm not aware that there is any, maybe John can comment.
Well, you answer first, and then microphone down to John. You've not got an answer, then Yasmin, no?
Well, I'm not aware of any concept that has testing that at the moment.
Yeah, I think there's some, in fact, I think funded by DESNOS, concepts looking at capture of CO2 via seawater, which I guess might be offshore. And then as to where it should be and the energy, well, if you look at, I guess, the leading large-scale DAX, it's being developed by Oxy with Vicky Holub, and they're using natural gas. And they're capturing the CO2 from the natural gas. There's loads of spurious idiots who basically say, oh, but you'll be releasing the CO2 from the natural gas. And it's like, you know, you would be if you didn't have a brain, but of course you're capturing the CO2 and putting it out the way.
Just challenge you on the communication language there.
Well, okay, but I mean, seriously, I mean, to suggest that people would use natural gas to power DAX and then not capture the CO2 from natural gas is a bit disingenuous. And then to me, it seems a pretty good idea, actually, to use fossil fuels to capture CO2 and take it out the air, and then you effectively you're preventing the CO2 from that fossil fuel itself from getting into the air, and effectively sterilizing what's a threat to the climate. So I think it will find it's all over the world in suitable places.
Yeah.
And as regards doing it in your own national jurisdiction, well, you know, Wales imports all of its natural gas, I think. So what's the difference? You know, we don't do everything inside our national jurisdictions, although it could make probably better use of its biomass. And I was going to ask a question about what Natural Resources Wales was thinking of combining biomass with CCS, because the Committee on Climate Change basically advocates, you know, using biomass with CCS to get the best benefit, and indeed burning, say, natural gas instead of burning biomass, because it gives you overall a better result.
Is that
I think that will
one? Yeah, Carl.
I guess this feeds back into thinking about the whole system. So what is the best option with regards to biomass in Wales? Is its importance with regards to energy production or and its role in BECCS? Or is it important with regards to biological or ecosystem diversity? And I guess that would depend upon the nature of the biomass, where it is, and the general type of land use in Wales more generally. So again, you know, that there is a danger. A lot of the discussion around decarbonisation has the potential to be quite narrow about the decarbonisation itself, but not think about the whole system and where is the sweet point with regards to it as an integrated system. I can understand why people may not be keen to try and do that because it's rather complicated, which is perhaps why we've struggled to do it historically. But from a sustainability and trying to tackle both climate and nature emergencies, we're going to have to.
Could I then just ask, that it seems to me there's to link nature-based solutions with these industrial solutions that we're talking about in this meeting, then there's huge enthusiasm for planting hectares and hectares of forest, because people like the idea of hectares and hectares of forest. But in 50 years' time, you're going to be left with a lot of dead forest. And so it doesn't actually store CO2 for any length of time. So sure, is there a role for an integrated agency like yours to plan and promote the sustainable closed system use of that, so that the forest actually becomes either a long duration wood resource for building, or the forest gets burned and puts back underground with the carbon dioxide? Do you see your role to promote that in any way, or is that just up to developers?
I believe we have a role in that. I'm not a forestry expert, but you can see that there is a need for longer term management. I mean, the one thing that about carbon capture and storage, it is long-term abatement, you know, that you're getting the carbon out of the system. And what you do need to try and be aware of, and it's about, again, about thinking about whole system, it's about thinking about life cycle. And it's about, you know, you don't want to be in a position of just delaying the carbon dioxide release, because ultimately it is carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere, and it'll hang around there for a long time. So it's what's that long, it's not just about short-term management, it's about long-term management as well.
Okay, thank you. Pass to Ben to do a commentary on that, and then I'll go get a question.
Yeah, I just want to comment on the biomass kind of side. I think and also I think wider on the kind of direct air capture story. There's a lot of focus on storage, and I do think there is, particularly when it comes to biomass, the first, I think, opportunity is to use biomass and capture the CO2 and actually create food grade CO2 from that. Because from work I did previously in my previous role, I know that actually, if you go through the anaerobic digestion process and you create biogas, you create a very relatively pure source of CO2, which could easily be used to displace food grade CO2, which is currently made through fertilizer production from natural gas. And there's a huge shortage of that. And I think that comes me back to my second point, is that we often talk about the carbon cost and there's the cost of carbon, but we don't talk about the actual pull from the industry. So if you look at the actual cost of food grade CO2, depending where you were 2-3 years ago, it varies from 500 pounds a ton to over 2,000 pounds a ton. So there is actually a natural
market pool for food grade CO2. And I think the same thing is the case for direct air capture, because if you can demonstrate to fashion designers, fashion companies, big Nikes and others, I've seen already, for example, CCU products being used in running shoes, that actually there might be a market pool that actually puts DAX on the map. Because if you can demonstrate that you take carbon out of the atmosphere and make a sustainable product from that, and actually avoid the use of fossil fuels or natural resources in the first place, that might be the first ethical step for DAX, rather than being a GGR kind of thing. And I think I see that pool coming very strongly, and particularly when it comes to food production. So the production of protein, ethical from DAX, I think could be a really interesting area for early adoption. So I think we should stop but think about only the cost side. We should also think about the opportunity end, because I think there is an opportunity for carbon capture and utilization, in particular, to get some of these things up and running, rather than only look at storage.
Okay, thanks. So I'd comment though that using CO2 in food or running shoes is only a temporary storage. So it's a displacement of fossil fuel, but it's not a storage. It's only storage for months or a year or two rather than permanent. So we have to be careful about what we're valuing.
That is correct, but it does stop the massive ramp up we're currently seeing in carbon emissions in globally. So I think we also need to see it as an early way of actually bringing that ramp up down, which we still see. So that early intervention, which is needed to limit global warming, I think there's a real role for that to play.
Question from the audience then, Matthew, say who you are.
Yeah, Mathieu Lucieux, University of Sheffield. Just going back to the BECCS question in Wales, there's potentially maybe 500,000 ton, 1 million ton of BECCS that can be done in Wales by capturing CO2 from waste, biogenic waste. So about 50% of our waste is biogenic carbon. So this is a form of BECCS that doesn't have any impact on the forest of Wales. So let's not forget that.
Okay. And over there, you had a question. Can you say who you are again, please? So, and if there's any questions from the back of the room, particularly people who are early career researchers, you are allowed to ask a question.
Hello, my name is Laurent Chan from the University of Oxford, Geography Department. So I have two questions. So one, coming back to the point of using natural gas to power DAX, I was just wondering about the potential, your thoughts on the potential of using stranded natural gas assets to power DAX plant. And secondly, about the transport with pipelines, I noticed that there's very little talk about the risk of leakage, CO2 leakage, with regards to pipelines. And I was wondering if you've got any comments on that. Thank you.
So that sounds like Abby and Yasmin initially.
Maybe I start with the pipeline question. I mean, I'm aware there's been research on pipeline release. I mean, if you have a pipeline, you can have a release, but you also have shut off valves. So if there would be an incident, you would shut it off. A certain amount would, of course, be released, but in the grand picture of things, what's going through the pipeline, you can usually contain it. And with regards of using natural gas for DAX processes, as John has already said, I mean, of course, if they use natural gas to fire something, this will be captured. You then have to be aware that depending on where the natural gas comes from, you will have upstream leakage of natural gas that you have to account for in your LCA. So you have to do an honest LCA taking all that into account, but you will still naturally remove CO2 from the atmosphere, even if you have a relatively leaky natural gas system.
Okay. And the second, did you answer both parts of your question now? Stranded gas. Any thought? I don't know if you'd develop a plant next to a stranded asset or not. Don't want to do that or not? No, okay, we'll ask another question then, right?
Depends on the...
Yeah. Can you say who you are as well, please?
Yeah, hello there. Yeah, Mark Griffiths, Natural Resources Wales, Missions Trading on Policy. You mentioned that you get, well, we know in Wales that we import all our gas. I just wondering, has anybody actually looked to see or if it's feasible for us to actually, because we've got, when the gas is offloaded, obviously you've got empty gas vessels going back to the gas wells. Is there any way in which we can actually use that to send CO2 back to the gas fields where you took it out? Because you obviously got a lot of empty tankers going back to the gas fields. If they've got CCUS, you could almost then sort of bring the gas into Wales, put the CO2 in and then send it back.
Return loads in
using the empty gas vessels,
which are not exactly the same DT condition. Anyway, does anybody want to do that? Yeah.
The simple answer is I've asked the same question. It's no.
Yeah.
And that's because the LNG is liquefied at atmospheric pressure at low temperatures, and you have a complete different, as Stuart said, a temperature and pressure regime. So you have to design the vessels completely from scratch if you want to do the shipping piece. And so they're completely differently designed vessels. And because it's also a very heavily regulated market, the shipping, it also has to meet all of those requirements. So there is already existing CO2 ships operational, mainly for CO2, food grade CO2 movements. And those designs have been adapted to do this kind of stuff. So it is actually a really bespoke design. And I think what I've seen from the partners in SWIC, Shell and RWE, they're working on an actually bespoke ship that actually minimizes the CO2 associated with the actual movement of the CO2. There's a lot of technology going into there, and also potentially there on the ship also talk about the capture of the CO2 associated with the actual the running of the ship. So I think there's a lot of work ongoing on that basis, and I can actually share some information after that if you want to see some.
Okay. I'm going to ask a question just brief while you take the microphone up. Although we are obviously top country since Brexit and isolated in the world, across the sea, you've got Ireland as a neighbour. So is there any communication between Wales and Ireland about sharing offshore storage in what we'd call the Irish Sea, north of North Wales, or in the Celtic Sea, which is westwards of South Wales? Because Ireland obviously has an increasing amount of gas plant and is stuck for storage. So I just wondered if there was any sign of collaboration across the border.
There are, in starting conversations, particularly on the hydrogen side between Ireland and Wales, that is happening. And I think that's mainly driven by Ireland's huge potential to generate wind, similar to West. And they're relatively small demand compared to that potential. So there's a real potential to export that. So I can see potential pipelines between Ireland and Wales in the same way that Milford Haven is now providing energy resilience into the UK and into Europe, that can be taken through to the Celtic side. I'm not aware of any discussions around stores.
Because again, in Dublin Bay, then that could be a mirror image of the Hamilton field and such like in the UK side. Anyway, right. So question. Yes, again, say who you are.
Hello, thank you. Saya Michael from the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero. I just want to ask mainly, I think, Ben and Lee. I want to know really the challenges and the constraints that you face in terms of planning, permitting, licensing. Where is, I think, the most challenge you have, apart from the cost-related stuff? Where do you see you can improve or people need to prepare better, the time scale it takes you? For example, we saw the Richard Stock RWE, a massive project, land issue, many aspects. Where do you see and what can the others, the clusters, the different investors need to prepare better, and where you could help as well? Thank you.
I think early engagement is key. Like I think I pointed out in the presentation, come to us before you enter any kind of statutory process, have clear evidence, have that collaboration with us internally before we actually go into determination process with our permitting. I think our permitting teams can have lots of workload, and it can be at times a queue, depending on what time the year it is, you know, whether the resources are stretched. So that can be an issue sometimes. There might be some delays on that. So again, early planning is key. And I think also when you submit an application, make sure it's complete, basically. Make sure you've got all the evidence, you know, in there, all the reports, you know, go through for a fine tooth comb, because last thing you want is that being kind of rejected, sent back to you, and the whole process starts again. So it's just making sure that whether you do it yourself or whether you use a consultant, you actually, you know, do a comprehensive, good job of that application. So we can make a good fist of determination in the process, that timescales that we have. And also look at you know, multiple benefits, I guess, of what you're doing. Can you bring something else, improvements of the, you know, ecosystem, local environment improvements, as well as the process you want to do? Don't know whether Karl wants to add anything on that.
Yeah, I think the one thing I'd say is as we're seeing with regards to the industrial clusters, having the collaborative approach and multiple organizations thinking about what they're trying to do together, because there may be quite a lot of dependencies, not just within the consenting and the permitting regimes, but there may be dependencies with regards to infrastructure, which also requires the permitting and consenting regimes to come into play. So I think really understanding and mapping out what the whole picture looks like, what sort of consents and permissions are needed, who needs to be involved, and is it possible to engage and try and flush out the problems early? Because as Lee was saying, once you get into statutory processes, the room to maneuver or the room to discuss or change things is quite difficult, because of course developers have already made quite a lot of decisions. So their room to move is quite difficult. So I think in terms of trying to de-risk projects, yeah, early engagement. But of course there's a degree of uncertainty about what people are doing, and what the response by regulators and consenting bodies might be to that.
Okay, if you're quick, because I've got a couple of questions stacked up.
Yeah, I think we need to frame it slightly different. And the framing is as follows. SWIC has a 30 billion investment program to deliver that net zero by 2040. That's what they're talking about. And 30 billion is over a 15-year period, theoretically, starting in 2025. That's £2 billion a year of investment, which is an unprecedented level of investment. So that is the key challenge here, is the actual kind of scale. So we're now seeing a massive bell curve coming towards us. And I think Lee and Karl are seeing that as well. But again, the resourcing is not there, because the resourcing is based upon a continuous flow of projects coming through in a very, so this is a transformational change. And so what the key thing is we need to focus on how we can actually make this transformational change happen. And Karl was mentioning collaboration. Collaboration is key. So what I want to work on with the regulators and with industry is actually on this co-creation. Can we co-create evidence so we can actually scrum and work in an agile way towards environmental and also planning permissions, rather than doing it in a sequenced way, which we always been doing. So, and that's the same way for when we talk about infrastructure, the same way we do with some of the other kind of challenges in this climate change. We need to start working in a collaborative way and scrum it, do it in an agile way, rather than doing it in a sequence and process way like we always have been doing. So that's the kind of way we need to work, because I think if you are environmental permitting, and there's some students here, I think you will have a 20 to 25 year easy career doing all the studies, because the amount of work needed not only to do industrial decarbonization, but also floating offshore wind, do the kind of infrastructure changes on the pipelines, whether it's hydrogen, Project Union, all that kind of stuff, on top of the pylons we will inevitably need to actually transport all that electricity from West Wales into the demand centers in the UK. There's a huge amount of construction going to happen. And I think this is the real challenge here, is resource just simply on actually getting this through the process.
It's the scale. It's not what we're doing, it's the size of it.
How many joiners are you going to get? Right, thank you very much. I've got a question online, and then I'll go to another question in the room, and then in about 5 or 6 minutes, then we're going to start with Bryony finishing off. It's just to give you advance warning. So question online is from Claire Goff at University of Manchester, and it's a DAX question about sequencing or authenticating what's viable, really. Claire Goff asks, the challenge with using DAX as a last resort for residual emissions is how you decide which emissions are indeed residual and can't be abated or reduced. Who decides that in a way which is equitable as part of the whole system approach to achieving net zero? So does the panel have any thoughts on how to decide which DAX is worthwhile, whether it's through the ETS or otherwise, given we're actually still a very long way from net zero? So pass the microphone along, and the person, when the music stops, has to answer the question.
So maybe I have a go first. I mean, that's a very valid and interesting question. Is there a right to fly, for example? Is there a right to fly and then have your emissions offset by DAX, right? Or is it a privilege? I mean, I had a very interesting presentation on that at the last negative emissions conference, and someone, Wilfried Rickels from Germany, he's an economist, he presented, and he said economically, usually, as long as you can put a price on it, there is some validity to it. But the question really as a society that we have to ask us is, how much do we need to consume? How much are we able to cut back? Should flying be kind of like a human right, right? I mean, we all like to go to a conference from time to time, but should there maybe be like per capita carbon budgets that you, it's a societal question that probably needs to be solved. Yeah. The question is, would you even be able to enforce it? And we have seen, especially in COVID, right, that kind of top-down enforcement in like Western countries just doesn't work.
Can do it. Okay, so I think I've got the last question over there from Erin. Do you want to ask your question? No, turn the microphone on at the bottom.
It'll be very quick because I think it pretty much duplicates previous one, part one. We've discussed building CO2 pipelines and rail quite a bit. It's a question mainly to NRW. What do you think are going to be the main challenges? And I guess just to kind of get a sense, how often do you think those planning applications might ultimately be rejected as a result of some of the challenges to building pipelines and rail to dispersed sites?
I mean, the pipelines, part of it isn't in our remit. Basically, we would look at, obviously, from a plan perspective, feeding into that as a consultation. There would be some ETS, UK ETS element of regulation, I think, on the pipeline. But as far as, refusing them, I mean, that would probably be not NRW's decision. It would be, more of a governmental decision, probably based on numerous factors. I don't know if you have anything on that, Karl.
I guess there will also be issues about associated infrastructure with some of these options. So it's not just about the shipping or the pipeline, or what about the compression facilities or liquefaction or interim storage provisions, or so there's all that other infrastructure that might be important. But I think I'd reflect on what we've said about thinking about the system as a whole and look at the opportunities. So these are, as Ben said, these are very, very large investments. These are big changes that are going on. So there's potentially options for looking at, can you do more than just think about the pipeline? Is there anything we can do with regards to thinking about biodiversity as we're actually trying to put this infrastructure in? Can we actually try and help with that sort of resilience? And in certain locations, is there an opportunity to do more with regards to securing climate change adaptation? because, you know, the inevitable issue here is if we don't sort this out from a mitigation perspective, we are going to have to adapt. So, you know, that's something else to try and think about. And with this, the huge sums of money that are likely to be swirling around, you know, the opportunity to do these things may not come around again for some considerable time.
There we go. That's it then from me. Anybody else got any quick points they want to make before I close out? So I think is that a quick point? Right, a minute, speaking to the mic, because we're over time, so I don't want you to ask. I don't want a big commentary. I just want a quick question, which can hopefully result in a yes or no answer.
My name's Julian State at Cardiff University. I just got a quick question to the panel about public opinion, how big its role is likely to be in this whole process, and what is being done perhaps to prepare for that.
Ben, you want to speak on that?
I think public perception is key. So I think what is great is that it's already a really good level of engagement in the Milford Haven energy cluster there. I think there's already some work done by Cardiff University actually with members of the public around their perception of CO2 capture and shipping, but also hydrogen and everything else. So that is actually ongoing, that work. So it's an important part and will be a really big component of what we're going to do going forward.
Seems good to me. And of course, Bayes or DESNZ have done national surveys about CCS, and there's a huge backdrop of information, and David Reiner's done lots of work with his group. And so, you know, we've got lots of information, but that's not quite the same as success. But anyway, so I'd like to say thanks to the panel for their opinions and being on the spot for so long. Thanks to the audience for asking the questions. I'm now going to pass over to Bryony Livesey, who's going to talk about whatever she's going to talk about with the Industrial Decarbonisation Challenge.
So thank you for this tremendous opportunity to close the conference. I'm Bryony Livesey and I lead the Industrial Decarbonisation Challenge. And you might find that quite a lot of what I mention, you've already seen in the conference. So it's a bit hard for me to be original, but we're in the situation where a lot of what is actually happening in the UK around decarbonising industry is being funded through our programme. We're tremendously proud of that and the progress we've made over the last few years. So the Industrial Decarbonisation Challenge was established to kickstart the decarbonisation of the UK's major industrial clusters. That doesn't mean delivering the infrastructure, but getting us on a path where people are confident that that infrastructure is the right thing ready to be built. The major clusters are shown as blobs on this map that was produced around about 2019. And we have £210 million of public money to spend on this, which is about a £500 million programme going on in total. So we started with the major industrial clusters, and this diagram sums up quite nicely why that is. So around half of the UK's industry emissions are in these roughly 6 clustered sites. So that makes a lot of sense to start there, and that indeed is what we've done. But not only do we have those concentrations of CO2, we also have these as places where cooperation between projects is a real possibility. And we all believe that getting the right scale of infrastructure in place in each region is very, very important, so that people have access to it and that we also develop this in the most cost-effective way. And so clusters are a great place where we can demonstrate that this can actually happen. And of course, this is all supported by accelerated development of policy support, which is so key for making progress in this area. We started the challenge in 2019 with the idea that we decarbonise at least one industrial cluster. And as we've moved through the 2020 budget, we moved up to 2 sites. We then moved towards the industrial decarbonisation strategy in March 2021, with the idea of having 4 of these regions in place by 2030. And of course, still the ambition to have the world's first net zero cluster by 2040. And then in 2021, that ambition was reinforced and the targets for CO2 capture and storage increased. And then, of course, the amazing budget announcement of 20 billion for early deployment of carbon capture, getting on with it right now. First phase projects about to be announced, and confirmation that in addition to the 2 clusters that have been taken forward, we'll have an additional 2. And of course, we're very excited to hear the announcements about that. So the Industrial Decarbonisation Challenge is a quick overview. It started in 2019 with the idea that all our work would be finished by March 2024, and we're still on track to achieve that despite all the massive changes going on around us. And that's testament to the extraordinary dedication of all the projects and people that we work with, and people recognizing this is really important and it should not wait. So if we start with our Industrial Decarbonisation Research and Innovation Centre, some of you might be being funded through that programme. Just a reminder that there is a call live now for flexible funding and also for secondments. And I'd really encourage you to think about those opportunities, and particularly if you're in industry and you'd like to work closely with an academic or have an opportunity to go and work in an academic team for a while, or if you're an academic who would like to go and work with an industrial partner, that's what this project is for. You can have about 4 weeks up to a few months. Your costs are paid, and as long as you can get the right partnership in place, you should be able to do some really useful work. If you need any help in finding partners, just let me know, because we're really keen to see people from this community coming forward and working more closely with industry on some of the key issues of the day. And then most of our money is going into these big deployment projects. So that is around getting the infrastructure in place at a design stage, understanding the CO2 pipelines and the storage, and of course, hydrogen production and distribution at scale. And then we have our cluster plans, which get the least amount of funding of all, but which we see as the crucial legacy from this programme. So getting these clusters working together collaboratively has been something that we have seen as going to be our lasting legacy from this programme. If we can't get this right, we're kickstarting decarbonisation in the wrong way. So all the projects are live now. They have been set up with the idea of building on the fantastic opportunity of the infrastructure that will be coming in their region, and also looking at what's a whole range of decarbonisation options that need to be put in place. And then crucially thinking about the social conditions, the skills that we need, the jobs, the economic benefits, and how we attract new investment into these regions, and how we engage communities, of course. So the projects finished in March 2023 on time as planned, which is amazing. They're all around the UK. They have all in March or sooner than March published their cluster plans. They've all had big launch events around their regions with lots of key stakeholders involved. Also, general public, politicians, funders, all involved in the launches. And then critically important, the plans all have ownership going forward. So we did not want to create roadmaps that just sat in a cupboard. These are supposed to be plans for the future. So although we are very proud that they finished in March 2023, this is really just the start of the implementation phase. And we really recognise that people have stepped forward to own these plans, and real commitment to take them forward over the next few years and help regions to thrive. You can find all the plans online all the clusters have got their own logos and websites. If you need any help finding them, just let me know. So what we've done in the Industrial Decarbonisation Challenge is move from blobs on a map to actual projects going on all around the UK. So every region has got a cluster plan associated with it, has a big deployment project associated with it. You can see this poster downstairs on display if you want to have a little bit closer look at the projects that are underway. And we're really proud of progress and, of course, seeing our clusters coming forward to be on the track 1 process and then hopefully announcements about track 2 quite soon. So that's clustering the whole goal of the Industrial Decarbonisation Challenge is around those clustered sites on the left, as I said. But the theme of this conference, I'm very conscious, is dispersed sites, and that's what we're supposed to be talking about. I had rather hoped that we'd have a little bit more to say on this, but I'll tell you what I can say as we go through. So I think the first thing to point out is clusters actually have real benefits when you're thinking about decarbonisation. It has proved to be possible to create genuine communities. When you go to these launch events for cluster plans, you feel a sense of excitement. You feel a sense that people know each other, which is so important. You get a sense that the industries are talking to each other about their plans. And I think that is vital, and we need to carry that thinking forward more. So I think the idea of cooperation between businesses and many organisations across the region to make decisions really important. The societal benefits are really important. How do we persuade people that these projects are a good idea? How do we make sure that these clusters are not closed shops, that they're open to people to join, they engage their relevant public sector organisations, they've got real broad communities of support? And then what else can we gain from a cluster? Just the decarbonisation is a fabulous thing to gain, but you can gain more from that. We can develop supply chains, we can think about job creation and so on. So they're really important things. And so some of that thinking is going to be taken forward into a new programme, which is called Local Industrial Decarbonisation Plans. I probably wouldn't be talking to you about this today if I didn't know quite a lot more about it than I was able to actually say. But so watch out for announcements fairly soon. But I'm really excited about this programme, which is going to move forward over the next few months. It's small. It's only £5 million of funding, but it's intended to fund these dispersed sites, which have currently got nothing. Nobody knows what to do. And the idea is to bring together communities so that they can start to behave like the IDC clusters do in some way. So with a real broad community of people involved, more than one industry involved. So this is not just decarbonising a cement plant. It's about what sits around that. What's it all for? And I know from the engagements I've had on this programme, is it seen as the early stage, what can we actually do together? So, there is really no blueprint for how we develop some of these dispersed sites and get the best advantages from them. We have to learn so much from this programme. So it's seen as a really important foundation for what will come afterwards. So we're open to local cluster project teams with industries involved. Of course, industries must be involved. It doesn't want to just sit there as a consulting work, but we'd like lots of different stakeholders to be involved. The idea is that the competition will launch in the summer, but it's not a fixed entity. So we want to work with the people who might be developing these plans to find out what they would really like to see, as well as just imposing it. So it's going to be a lot of engagement with people before the competition launches in the summer. And then the other thing we're going to do is try and provide the people who are bidding into the competition with some support, because a lot of the organisations that are bidding into this competition haven't got much of a clue about decarbonisation, possibly. And I think they won't really know what the right way to go is, and they might need support in how to put the cluster together and think about a successful bid. So we're going to provide people with that. And then for the successful projects as they move forward, then we will have some expert advisors to support them on their journey and say, have you thought about doing this? Might it be a good idea to bring someone in from this community, or that kind of thing, with the idea that this important programme will really deliver tremendous insights for the UK by the time it finishes in March 2025. But I can't say any more than that. So I think it's a tremendously exciting opportunity. So we are going to have advisors coming from various different backgrounds, people who might have a lot of experience, people who might just be passionate about the subject. We're interested in people who are interested in skills, social impacts, the technical realities of how to do this. So just an advert to some extent. This is not a full-time job for anybody. It'd be something like a day or two every quarter. It's not a big amount of work, as we can't afford that. But if you are interested in supporting this programme, then I'm really keen to just talk to you about it and just see if we can make that happen, because I think it is a good idea to get people who are experts in this field to help people who are not really quite knowing the way forward. And at the heart of the Industrial Decarbonisation Challenge, we have always put knowledge sharing as one of our key deliverables. We do try to encourage people who know something to share with others. And, you know, we have sitting in our cluster plans, a project in the Black Country, which is an absolutely fantastic example of how you can develop a cluster plan without being close to a source of CO2 shipping or CO2 storage. So we know it can be done, and you know, we'll be using that project as real inspiration for the clusters that will come along. So where are we going next in general? The cluster plans are all embarking on the delivery journey. We'll be celebrating that at the All Energy Conference in Glasgow in May. So all the plans will be there. We've got a big stand to show them all off, and we've got a couple of conference sessions set aside for celebrating what's going on and sharing with people what's been achieved. And then we're also working very hard on developing a plan to bring all those cluster plans together to develop a UK-wide plan. We'll be launching that publicly in the autumn. And then our projects are due to be completed in March 2024. They're on track to do that and move into their next stage of their journey. So there's a lot happening this next year. And then we continue to focus on how can we share learning from this programme in as meaningful a way as possible, and to explore very much about what more can an industrial cluster deliver to decarbonisation in the UK. Thank you very much.
Are you taking any questions, Bryony?
I'm happy to answer any questions if people have them.
Yes. Yeah.
Hi, thanks, Bryony. Adrian Tolman from Crown Estate. I probably know the answer to this if I sort of thought about it, but I'll ask you anyway, because you'll probably have a more prepared answer. Why a UK-wide plan, having done the 6 separate clusters? What's the aim there?
Well, it's an interesting question. What we decided to do when we kicked off the challenge is we did not mandate what a plan should look like, and we did not mandate how you should determine the jobs you were creating or how you would account for the CO2 or anything like that, because we took the view that whatever the region thought was the right thing for them to do, get on and do it. But we need a national picture on how many jobs we're creating, what is the actual CO2 reduction from this program. So we're bringing it all together, all the data from these plans, to put it into something which just says, if we put the whole outputs from this work together, what is the industrial decarbonisation challenge actually going to deliver and by when? And so it's just to make sure it's really as robust as it can possibly be.
System accounting.
What about cluster shipping or connecting up pipelines to other clusters? Is that, because I'm not aware of any, but it seems a possible thing to do.
Yes, well, we are looking at shipping in the big deployment project.
But I was thinking particularly of pipelines. I mean, yeah, when are we going to get the Transpennine pipeline, which is obviously needed?
Yes, well, I suppose when asked a question like that, I always say it's not my job to decarbonise the UK, just these 6 industrial clusters. So we are not involved in pipelines. That will have to come in the future.
Okay.
Hi, it's David Lockwood, CTF. Just wondering how maybe not only these cluster plans, but is there any issue where they come up against reality in terms of which projects get funded by the end of this week? You know, if particular projects get funded to connect, and they'll be the first ones to connect to a network, and maybe that network would have to look different from what they've envisioned. I don't know, is there some sort of...
Yes, and that's one of the reasons why the plans need to be living things, because things change, don't they? But I think the plans themselves are focused on what's possible by 2030 rather than what's possible in 2023. So they are longer term. They include a whole range of decarbonisation options anyway. They also recognise that given that we've only got 5 cluster plans, coastal clusters that we're currently supporting, you know, and we know that 4 clusters are supposed to be active by 2030, that there might be delays and things coming in and out. But I don't think it's seen as crucial to the validity of the plans that things change. I think the most important thing is they've got a structure in place. Amounts will go up and down. And that's what you'd expect. And that's a good thing, really, as long as we have a way of keeping the plans live to reflect that.
Thank you. Hi, Lindsay Armstrong from the University of Southampton and Academic Cluster Lead for the Solent Cluster. So obviously not one of the dots on there because we weren't part of the IDC competition originally, but when we're talking about the UK-wide plan, and you mentioned the 6 plans that are already there, I'm wondering, should we be looking at also these additional plans for the other clusters that are not just the IDC, but also the wider ones? Because there are a number of them that have popped up since. So if we're going to build a UK-wide picture, it might be useful to have all of the cluster plans from all of the clusters that are not necessarily IDC to actually build a more rigorous picture based on all of the data that they're all including.
It might be, but the UK-wide plan is bringing together the IDC supported programme to say, what are we going to deliver? It's not trying to say, this is what the UK can do as an entity. It's saying that when we put this plan together and announce it in autumn, we'll be able to see how close we are with the projects we're already involved in to getting where we want to be. And, you know, there might be a gap, and that might be seen by new clusters as a good thing. So I think, you know, at the moment, the focus is mainly on trying to make sure that emerging clusters can share in the benefits of the work that's been done elsewhere, learn from that, and then, you know, see what the key areas are to focus on rather than looking, you know, more generally, which obviously costs more money.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, I think people are getting ready for lunch. One thing I would say, Bryony, actually, just from this is from the census perspective and getting information to people, is that we can, obviously we're used to reaching out to people via web lectures and things like that, and we can do that for if the people are identified. And also there's events like this which are free to come to. And so you know, there's actually quite a concentrated source of information for people to get.
Thank you. I definitely agree with that. And, you know, we have encouraged some of our clusters to actually come today and put up posters downstairs, which I think is a nice addition to the conference. And I think that, you know, when people come and they tell other people about what a great event it is, I hope we'll see more and more people turning up, because, you know, certainly I find these conferences tremendously valuable. You know, I've learned such a lot about what is important about how to develop one of these clusters from the discussions we've had here. And I think, you know, more people need to benefit from that. So we do our best. Thank you.